You're on.
Good evening. Good evening. I'd like to call our meeting to order. We have our distinguished guest, Superintendent DonAguillard, Lafayette Parish School Board, and we appreciate you being here, Lafayette. And I remember that you were here last year, so appreciate you making your annual track to visit our audience. Ed, I thank you for all the hard work that you do in videoing our meetings. Our next meeting will have President Mayor Lafayette Consolidated Government Joel Robideau. So y'all come with y'all's questions. Carol, if you'll come forward and introduce our guest speaker, appreciate it.
Come on in, Ms. Jackie. We'll wait for you. We're very happy and proud to be able to have our superintendent come in and be with us this evening. Most of you know him very well. But Dr. DonAguillard began his tenure as a superintendent of schools for the Lafayette Parish School System on May 18, 2015. As Chief Education Officer, Dr. Aguillard manages the district $425 million budget and his staff over 3,500 employees. The school district utilizes 43 campuses to provide educational services and approximately 30,500 students. Prior to Dr. Aguillard's appointment, he served nearly 11 years as the superintendent of the St. Mary Parish School Board. 28 years of earlier work experience in Lafayette included classroom teacher, assistant principal, area director, and a district administrator. One of his unwavering beliefs is that school improvement is achievable through deliberate action. Dr. Aguillard earned a bachelor's degree in 1975 in secondary science education, a master's degree in 1978 in curriculum, and an educational specialist degree in 1981 in administration and supervision from the University of Southwestern Louisiana. In 1998, he completed his doctorate degree in curriculum instruction from Louisiana State University. Under his leadership, the district will embrace a data-driven, results-oriented culture of best educational practices to strengthen teaching and learning. The superintendent's vision is that we will work fearlessly to transform the Lafayette Parish school system in an A-rated district. Dr. Aguillard is married to Karen White. Karen, she just retired in 2011 from the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, where she was an instructor within the mathematics department. He and his wife, Karen, have 3 grown sons, William, White, and Michael Johnson. We're certainly happy that you will be able to be with us.
Thank you.
So good evening. It was about a year ago that I had the good fortune to be invited to speak to this organization, and I have to tell you that afterwards I told the story for months that this is a tough group to speak to, because you guys are interested in good government, you're interested in very conservative practices, and I want to believe that you're terribly interested in what public education is and can be in the Lafayette Parish community, because whether we really embrace the idea, the quality of the public school system has a large role to play in the success of Lafayette, economically and financially. I stood before you a year ago and talked about my vision for the Lafayette Parish school system. Very early on, I challenged the principles that Lafayette Parish, in my opinion, was very poised to become much more efficient as a school system. And one of the ways that we judge school systems is the state gives letter grades. And of course, Lafayette has a very, very respectable letter grade that is represented by the letter B. And there's nothing wrong with saying that you are a B-rated school system. However, most of us were probably in school at some point and we wanted to make A's. I know some of you wanted to make A's in school because the A really represented exemplary performance. Okay, so maybe somebody thought when I was talking about raising student achievement in Lafayette Parish and causing an entire school system to improve was just absolute folly. That there is no chance that one person can drive a systemic change to the point where a year later there might be some tangible evidence that Lafayette Parish is on the move. But I want to give you great hope, because in about 5 weeks, the Department of Education will release what will be school letter grades for this past year. They'll also release letter grades for districts. So expect that release of that information sometime around the 3rd week of October. We have the ability internally in Lafayette Parish to begin to see some of the raw data and begin to make predictions about our success. So I want to give you a couple of things to be very, very hopeful about. So let's just go down the list and talk about achievement. So 3rd grade students scored better in English language arts than the year before. In fact, when you look at their combined scores, 3rd graders gained 2.4 index points above 3rd graders the previous year. Now, I haven't told you yet what value an index point is, but it's important to note that a positive number is a good thing. So in 3rd grade in ELA, we had a good positive gain of 2.4 points. In 5th grade, 5th graders scored 5.2 index points better than the year before. 6th grade scored 0.7 points better than the previous year. 7th grade scored 1.3 index points better than the previous year. 8th graders scored 8.2 index points better than the previous year. The only grade I didn't announce is 4th grade. They dropped 1.8 index points. But in English language arts, in grades 3 through 8, we had strong gains in student achievement compared to the year before. In mathematics, 3rd graders gained 13.8 index points above the previous year. 4th graders gained 9.5 index points. 5th graders, 10.4 points above the previous year. 6th grade, 2.4 points. 7th grade, 1.1 points. And 8th grade, 2 points above the previous year. In science, 3rd graders scored 9 index points better than the previous year. 4th grade, 2.3 points better. 5th grade, 3.7 points better. 6th and 7th grade dropped 2.5 and then are 2.7 points. And lastly, 8th grade gained 5.4 points. Now that's a lot of numbers for you to digest, but what I want you to take away from that is that of 18 measures of student success, 6 in ELA, 6 in math, and 6 in science, Lafayette Parish dropped in 3. of the 18 measures of student success. So let's go to high school now, because we talked about 3rd through 8th grade. High school kids take end-of-course tests. So they take an Algebra 1 test, or they take a geometry test, or a biology end-of-course test, or an English 3 end-of-course test. So high school students in Lafayette Parish in Algebra 1 scored 12.7 points better than the previous year. In geometry, 5.5 points better. In biology, 0.3 points better. In English 3, 6.4 points better. The only two subjects that dropped in high school were English 2, dropped 0.6 points, and U.S. history dropped 2.9 points. Now, you might be asking, that's all fine and good, but what does that mean? So, what that means is that in about 5 weeks, Lafayette Parish is going to report, we predict, the largest single-year increase in student achievement in the history of accountability in Lafayette Parish. So I really haven't explained to you what an index point is. So by comparison, an index point would seem like what's called a school performance score point. So as an example, in 2013, Lafayette had a district performance score of 90.5, which is a B score. The next year, in 2014, it dropped to 90. Last year, 2015, it dropped again to 89.2. All of those scores are B labeled. However, you can see the trend, 90.5 to 90 to 89.2. So now with the year of growth that we just had in the Lafayette Parish school system, we think, and I'm using this because I don't see the final scores yet from Baton Rouge, we think we're going to grow as a district roughly 7 accountability points. And that is important because I wanted principals as instructional leaders to really commit to growing about 2.5 points per year, knowing that it would take roughly 4 years of academic growth to move Lafayette from a B to an A-rated school system. One of the principals in the district, as soon as I made that announcement, decided to retire. We got another principal. You see, some of those principals weren't sure that we could grow 2.5 points. In fact, based on the prior 3 years of data in Lafayette Parish, listen, it didn't look promising that we could move the needle in 1 academic year and grow a mere 2.5 points. But here's the good news. We think that when scores come out, we'll likely have a 6 to 7 point increase in district performance score, which means if we can duplicate that effort this year, that in 2 years we will have moved Lafayette from a B labeled school district to an A labeled school district. Something that I believe Lafayette deserves because it really signifies the quality of the public school system. Now, what does that do to individual schools? So what do you have to do to grow that amount of achievement in 1 year? See, what happens is many schools have to be successful. In fact, when we're looking at our 43 schools, we see only 4 schools that will not post positive gains in student achievement in the district. We're looking at roughly 10 of our schools that will grow double-digit gains in student achievement. 10 or more accountability points in one academic year. We're looking at the large majority, in fact, about 75% of schools grew at least the 2.5 points expected of them. So Lafayette Parish is doing many things well, and in a mere 5 weeks, we'll know the final numbers from accountability in Baton Rouge, and of course we'll publish that information. You see, just about every indicator is showing a positive number for Lafayette schools. Everything from achievement in grades 3 through 8, to end of course test, to the graduation rate, to the credentials that Lafayette students earn, to the accomplishment of our students in Lafayette Parish. And the good news is that for the first time ever, as far back as you can measure student achievement, we've done something that this community has expected and asked for. We have begun to close the achievement gap. So I don't know if that's important to you or not, but the achievement gap is defined as the disparity in achievement between white and African American students, as measured by test scores. The achievement gap in Lafayette Parish and other districts and across the entire United States is real. And what happens is these kids all go to school and they get on the bus the first day of school, they have the same cafeteria food, they have the same textbooks, they take the same test, and students grow, but to close the achievement gap, you have to have two things happen. You have to increase student achievement for at-risk students, in this case, African American or black students. You have to have their achievement grow faster than white achievement in those classrooms. Second thing you have to ensure is that you don't inadvertently cause student achievement in the white category to diminish. You don't want that to happen. You want places that have at-risk students to grow faster than in other places where kids are performing well. So I tell you, for the first time that I can see, going all the way back to 2011, we see evidence the achievement gap has shrunk. Now, we only have 1 year's worth of data, and 1 year doesn't make a trend. But it's a nice talking point, because in grades 3 through 5, looking at English language arts, in 2015, the achievement gap was a full 27 points. White students scored an average of 79.6% scoring basic or better. Black students had 52.6% of students scoring basic or better. The gap between 79.6 and 52.6 is a full 27 points. In 2016, the year that just ended, the gap between white and black achievement in English language arts in grades 3 through 5 had diminished from 27 points the previous year to 22.5 points. That's a decline of 16.6% in the achievement gap in grades 3, 4, and 5 in English language arts. It never happened before in the Lafayette Parish school system. In mathematics, the achievement gap between 2015 and 2016 in mathematics in grades 3, 4, and 5 shrank 15.8%, moved from 23.3 to 19.6. In science, in grades 3 through 5, the achievement gap shrunk 12.68%, from 34.7 to 30.3. In middle schools, in grades 6, 7, and 8, the achievement gap in English language arts dropped 11.68%, dropped from 23.1 to 20.4. Mathematics, grades 6 through 8, was the only area where the achievement gap increased. It increased from 29.2 to 31.4%, a 7.5% increase. And lastly, in science, the achievement gap in middle schools dropped from 36.2 to 34.5%, a decline of 4.6%. Again, that's just an interesting data point. It's just 1 year's worth of data, but it's encouraging that we are identifying at-risk students specifically, and we are addressing their needs through intense remediation, in some cases enrichment, in some cases extended learning. We are beginning to see evidence the achievement gap is beginning to be addressed in the Lafayette Parish school system. So I say all of that to tell you that we see strong evidence that the academic plan that the Lafayette Parish school system has is working, and that it will likely take several more years to really put a dent in the achievement gap, but likely another year, no more than 2, to move Lafayette to become an A-rated school system. And so how much time do I have?
Go ahead.
Plenty of time.
Okay. I wanted to show you a PowerPoint, because the one thing that is the big elephant in the room is facilities. So before I show you our PowerPoint regarding facilities, I want to make sure we understand we are doing things to address student achievement with the facilities we have today. We're not waiting on new buildings, new classrooms, new facilities to begin the process of accelerating student achievement in Lafayette Parish. The reality about facilities are that you own those buildings. They're yours. They're mine. They're our buildings. And one of these days, there will probably be another opportunity by citizens of Lafayette to make a decision about facilities. And it's going to come down to what people feel is in the best interest of citizens of Lafayette. So this first slide is I guess it's a stormy day in Lafayette. These slides were taken in March. So what you're looking at is you're looking at just an artist rendition of the entryway to our new high school being built in South Lafayette, in Youngsville, Southside High School. As you look across the Lafayette Parish school system, we have exactly 6 schools that are at 100% of capacity. All of the remaining schools, some 34 remaining schools, are over capacity. On average, the Lafayette Parish School System's facilities are nearly 130% over capacity. One or more of our buildings are over capacity by 250%. The best example of that would be Evangeline Elementary School and Milton Elementary School. Have 2.5 times more temporary buildings than permanent classrooms on campus. So when you have a cafeteria that was built, let's say for 500 students, and you now have 800 students in that school, you start feeding those kids as early as 10:30 in the morning, and the last bunch of kids will go through that cafeteria at about 1:30 in the afternoon. Students in lots of schools spend their entire 20-minute lunch period either standing in line or waiting for a seat in the cafeteria for lunch. Most of those cafeteria breaks for kids is about 20 minutes. LJ Alamon just got a brand new cafetorium. Just opened a few months ago. They were 1,000 kids in the old cafeteria. And they have to be all great kids because there's a system. You stand with your plate against the wall until you see somebody get up. They finish their meal. And you slide into that seat because there's now a seat available in the cafeteria. So I hope this number doesn't grow any larger in Lafayette. We own 490 temporary buildings. Now, I've been in this business for a little over 40 years now. Temporary buildings used to be called T buildings, T for short. They were also called Butler buildings. Now they're called modular classrooms. Here's the reality. Several of those T buildings in Lafayette Parish are over 50 years old. In fact, I started at Acadiana High School in December of 1975. There were already 4 temporary buildings just outside the Commons area. They're still there today. There's a black and white photograph of Lafayette High School on the wall in the central office. It's a 1952 black and white photograph of Lafayette High School. There are 2 temporary buildings in that picture. They're still there today. And they're still called temporary buildings. Okay, so what happens when you park a modular building? Well, first of all, you have to roll them into the slot. They're on wheels. And after 40 years, the tires just rot out off of the rims. That's what you see there. We give them numbered nomenclature in case we have to move them around. We know where they are. They all have a serial number. And now with modern requirements for accessibility, nearly every temporary building needs a ramp and oftentimes a covered canopy to those buildings. So you're looking at one of our campuses that has more temporary buildings behind the school than classrooms in the main building. And by the way, I don't know if you've noticed this. We put them in the back of the buildings. Do you know why? Out of sight, out of mind? Maybe we should be putting these buildings near the front, near the street, so that people can be reminded that those 4 490 temporary buildings, 20% of our students every day are educated in those temporary buildings. 20%. There's another bird's eye view of all of the temporary buildings behind the main campus. So if you line them all up, that's what 490 temporary buildings looks like. The ones shaded in green, they house elementary students. So about 60% of the temporary buildings in the district go to elementary schools. You see the light blue buildings are at the middle schools. The high schools have a large number, and then some of our career and prep campuses also have temporary buildings. Okay, so I brought this PowerPoint, and right here in the PowerPoint, we're going to let you listen to what it looks like in a classroom when the air conditioners are running, but the file, for whatever reason, the file didn't load. So we have a better example. This room, you hear the air conditioning? Well, so double the sound that you hear now, the air conditioning, and think about how that impacts instruction on a daily basis when the air conditioners cycle on and off in these classrooms. When it rains really hard on those metal roofs, incredibly difficult for kids to really understand what the classroom teacher is saying. So, I guess you've noticed it's been raining a lot. So that's sort of what it looks like between classes. And we had this great video of this child. This was in March, elementary student, running through the rain. You can't see it because the file didn't load. But what happens in a lot of our schools is that kids get drenched going between temporary buildings. And when they get drenched, they don't just go to class and sit with wet clothes. They oftentimes go to the gym, and the schools have clothes that they can borrow. They change into these clothes that are available at the school, and they throw the wet clothes in the dryer in the gym, and the kids pick up their clothes an hour later. That happens on a regular basis in the Lafayette Parish school system. Kids are soaked, they wear sweats, they wear other uniforms, clothing that's available, they swap it out once it's dry, and they get it back from the coach. And one of the things that happens is, years and years and years ago, school systems required kids to have mesh book bags. So just think what happens to instructional materials when it's pouring. Literally, education can stop, at least in spirit, in the Lafayette Parish school system. And when there's extreme weather conditions, we evacuate our buildings. They're not safe. We move all of those 20% of our students, 6,000 students, 20% of 30,000. We move those kids into the main buildings. So just as a point of reference, in terms of where we are as a community, Lafayette ranks in the bottom quartile as it relates to per pupil funding. Your tax dollars put us in the bottom 20% of school systems in Louisiana. In terms of per pupil funding among all parishes with major cities, Lafayette ranks dead last. Behind Slidell and St. Tammany, behind Lake Charles, behind Alexandria, behind EBR, behind New Orleans, behind Shreveport, behind Houma Terrebonne. We rank dead last. Now, this slide hasn't been updated because there's been some movement in property taxes, but I'm told that Lafayette still ranks dead last in combined millages among our peer groups, which are large school systems and school districts. So this is the new L.J. Alamon Cafetorium entrance. Very nice. This is a kid running through the rain in one of our temporary buildings. This is the brand new cafeteria at L.J. Alamon. This is the cafeteria at Lafayette High School, our flagship high school. This is the new stage at the L.J. Alamon Cafeteria. This is the stage at Lafayette High School. Notice where our, our performing arts student is practicing. On the ramp to a temporary building. This is the dance studio at Lafayette High School. This is in the gymnasium at Lafayette High School, our flagship high school. Okay, so if I asked you what those things were, you could probably guess sandbags. Mm-hmm. You might say, well, that happened because of the recent flooding. Not correct. Those sandbags are at Lafayette High on a permanent basis because every time it rains, the auditorium floods. Okay, so there aren't enough umbrellas for the 6,000 kids that are educated in temporary buildings. Not even close. Okay, so I didn't tell you anything about, when will the community have a chance to discuss facilities? I don't know the answer to that. Quite frankly, I just don't know. At some point, there will have to be a conversation, and at some point, there likely should be a vote, because the citizens have a decision to make about facilities. They're our schools. Down the road in Iberia Parish, our neighbors, they have exactly 2 temporary buildings in the Iberia Parish school system. 2. Every one of their high schools has an all-weather competition track. Every one of their facilities have been recently rebuilt, refurbished, improved. They've spent money to provide heightened security for their students on their campuses. In Iberia Parish, what's been done is they put together a package of projects so that everybody knows what the money is going to be used for. And that goes to the voters. And the voters in Iberia Parish have found a way to routinely pass millages, pay off the debt, go back to the voters, give them another list of projects, build those projects, go back to the voters, and keep doing this until the citizens decide what their schools should look like. And I think that's probably where Lafayette's headed, is we can't, there's no way you, your neighbors, your friends can afford to fix all of the facility problems over a 10-year period. You can't afford it. But maybe the way you eat an elephant is a bite at a time. And you do that by going to the voters to give them something tangible that they can see built with their money, much like the airport tax. We should see a brand new airport terminal soon. Maybe the idea is we bring a list of projects and we ask the voters, do you want to do these facility improvements? If so, this is the mechanism that we're going to use. So I have a second PowerPoint that I'm not going to bore you with, but I'm going to leave copies of the PowerPoint with you so that, because it speaks to the academic gains of the district. So I'm going to stop here and take a series of questions.
Thank you, Dr. Aguillard. My first question is, how smoothly did the schools open this year as opposed to last year?
Great question. I know you know on day 2 we closed unexpectedly. I left my house at 6:30 in the morning. I've been watching the radar. I was up at 4 o'clock in the morning watching the radar and communicating with some of my key staff members. Backed out of my driveway, went a short distance, pulled into the nearest Chevron station, made a call to my risk manager, told her to cancel school. At that time, I thought we had a very potentially serious rain event. Never envisioned this was going to be a 30-hour rain event. The schools opened, the schools were closed for 6 days. I think you know we lost Westside Elementary School in Scott. It had 12 to 15 inches of water. Those students are now being bused. The kindergarten, first grade students are being educated at Scott Middle School. The 2nd through 5th grade students are bused across town to Moss Prep, where classrooms are available for them. They'll be there likely the remainder of the school year. We are going to need to rebuild West Side Elementary School. Literally the only thing left the architect sees is the roof and the foundation. Everything in between needs to be rehabilitated. We're working with FEMA. We're working with our insurance company. We also have flood insurance. So it's going to be probably a $6 million project for the district.
Another question.
I read in the newspaper recently that the high school students are using about 30 minutes of their day to prep for the ACT test. And I was wondering, how is it that that program went into effect?
Another great question. The high schools had been running what's called a skinny, which is a 30-minute class period. It's called a skinny. Other high schools have been running the skinny for approximately 3 years. Lafayette High was the only high school not running the 30-minute skinny. The district's ACT scores have gone stagnant. In fact, they have dropped incrementally over the past 6 years. One of the ways that we can improve our accountability is to increase student achievement. At the high school level, it's measured largely by ACT scores. So we looked at other successful districts. They had been modeling their 30-minute RTI class, much like Lafayette is doing right now. We are remediating students in preparation for the ACT score. Right now, our ACT score as a district is under 20. We want to be at least 21 as a school system. That would move us in the top 10 in Louisiana. So that's why we're doing the skinny. We have great expectations. It's going to help our students score better in the ACT.
I've noticed that there's been some programming changes at the various schools, and I'll point to Como High School as being more intense with reference to performing arts. I noticed that there's a budget item of maybe $600,000 with reference to some construction. What do you envision is necessary to get that program where it should be?
Again, you probably all know that the board recently decided to move performing arts from Lafayette High to Como High School. What you may or may not know is that Como High School had always been planned to be the performing arts high school. It just never happened. Lafayette High, a year ago, was approaching 2,500 students. There are too many students for the facilities at Lafayette High School. The board looked at one or more programs to move ahead of the rezoning that's set to be decided by the board. Performing arts will move in 17-18 to Como High School. The board just recently budgeted $500,000 for architectural services. An architect's going to be retained. We need some instructional areas, specifically at Como High School, to accommodate performing arts classes. So the architect's going to come back to the board. A bid will be received from contractors. The low bid will be determined, and then the architect will bring that budget back to the board for funding. We envision that those kids will be in temporary accommodations at Como High for a year, then they'll move into their new instructional areas. So we see a dance studio, we see performing arts, string, guitar, music. We also see a black box theater that will seat 100 individuals. Down the road in phase 2, if we ever do a phase 2, we see Como High getting an auditorium, but the cost was about 50-50. It's about $6 million for the instructional areas versus about $6 million for an auditorium. The board opted to go with the instructional areas.
I guess this is more of a philosophical question, and you're to be commended and get good credit for having the various incremental increases with reference to the student performance. But why is it, for example, that there's a focus on performing arts and also equal focus on reading and math and science? How is it that, why don't we just get down to basics, reading, writing, and arithmetic, as opposed to fooling around with performing arts?
That's a good question. It's really not that complicated, the answer. The schools of choice developed in Lafayette Parish. We have quite a few programs, offerings that families want. Parents want their children to go to a themed school, either elementary, middle, or high school. Now, quite frankly, it's expensive. It's expensive to transport those kids out of their school zone to a school of choice. But it's a decision that the parents of Lafayette like. And yes, it would be true that you could save some money and you could educate those kids in their home school. I guarantee you that decision would not be well received by the citizens of Lafayette. See, here's the truth. You have one of the most versatile public school system anywhere in the country. Because a child is not trapped in any one school. A child can get on a bus and go to Leo Judy's, or go to Myrtle Place, or go to Lafayette Middle, or go to Karen Crowe Middle, or go to the Performing Arts Academy at Lafayette High School. Not only that, you have David Thibodeau STEM Magnet High School, very successful. We're building that school out. Kids want the STEM education. We also have, if none of that interests you, and you want to get on with a college experience, you can go to Early College Academy. And you can graduate from the Lafayette Parish School System with an associate degree. So you could say, let's strip all of these programs and get back to the basics. I venture that that would not be well received. That's what makes Lafayette the kind of school system that it is, because we have choice, we have offerings, we are tailoring the experience to fit the needs of our children. Strip it all away and save money, that's not going to help kids. So one of these days it may come to that. One of these days it may come to the point where you can't afford to bus these kids. Well, you may or may not be, and that's your decision as an individual. I believe that the choice is still to be made in the Lafayette Parish School System. Kids get on the bus. They get up at 5:30 in the morning to go to a common bus stop to catch a bus all the way across town to go to David Thibodeau. And you know, maybe some people say that's unnecessary. Well, I get that. It just happens to be very effective and well liked at this point.
Second question, I see we're getting ready. Do you have a question for us?
I do.
Please come up.
Sure.
My name's Patty Carter, and I'd like to commend you for your improvement in the school district. I have a question about the Butler building, and if you have a general figure, dollar-wise, on what we're expending a year on renting the Butler buildings. And also, you had approached the subject of possibly asking for a 1% temporary sales tax like the airport did. Are you thinking about that? But anyway, I'd like to see you get in front of the current body of government in Lafayette that is talking about a 1% sales tax to build another bridge across the river, which I think is totally a waste of money. I'd rather see money coming out of our pockets going to the school district than another bridge across the Vermilion River. And also, I'd like to know if you've been able to attract back any of the teachers that left in the previous administration, the good teachers that left, if you've been able to bring any of them back in the fold.
So unfortunately, we own most of those buildings. I would say that we lease fewer than 20 of those 490 buildings. Otherwise, we own those buildings. Have we attracted teachers back? Yes, absolutely. We're still hiring. We're hiring people, surprisingly, who have retired and who want to return back to work. They have to be hired under a critical shortage situation, but when they come back, they earn their retirement benefit plus their full teacher's salary. So we have attracted, and incredibly, recently we actually had a couple of teachers from Vermilion Parish come back to Lafayette. That's a good sign. And in regards to tax, I did not say specifically what the plans are for myself or the board. I realize this is going to be incredibly challenging, I just happen to not see a solution. We can pretend that it doesn't matter, and the buildings are going to keep functioning. Make no mistake about it. We're going to fix the leaks. We're going to repair the air conditioners. We're going to dig trenches so flooding doesn't occur on a regular basis. We're going to keep maintaining those buildings. They're not falling down. They're still in the back of the building, out of sight, out of mind. But they're getting older. And if that's what the citizens of Lafayette want, if that's all they can afford, so be it. Are you kidding me?
I'll give you one more shot.
I have a great instructional team working for me. Joe Craig is the Chief Administrative Officer. Annette Samick is the Chief Academic Officer. Kathy Aloisio works with elementary schools. Brian Hebert works with middle and high schools. We have a strong team determined to solve problems. If you call any member of that team, we will get you an answer to your question or your concern. You may not like the answer you get, but we're going to respond to your concern. So I want you to know we're doing everything we can to move Lafayette forward. Don't read anything into me raising my voice tonight. I just wanted to reiterate, it's not about the money. If I said we have plenty of money, somebody would take that to Channel 10 and say, you see, we don't need any more money. But
You were brave to show that, but I thank you for it.
you're welcome.
Highly educational.
I wish you had seen the two video clips. Very, very compelling. We'll get a chance to show that again if we ever get to the point where we're trying to convince the public. Thank you.
Before we go, I just want to remind you, thank you again for being here, Doc. But for sure, on the 3rd of October, our next speaker, if you can possibly put that in your schedule, Joe Robideau, City Parish President here in Lafayette. So you'll, make that a date. Thank you all very much. We'll see you then.